they don't really understand handheld gaming. More specifically, I think some of us forgot, including myself. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of forgot. And the more and more I've kind of been doing research, looking at people's experiences with handheld devices, researching the Steam Deck, looking stuff up, looking to see what other types of devices out there, besides the Switch 2, obviously. I'll tell you, I'll get into that in a bit. But yeah, just looking and trying to make sure if I'm going to spend that amount of money to get a device like that, I buy the right device or the best possible choice for me personally. And the more and more I look into this, the more and more I remember how I used to play games back when I was a lot younger. It was not all on a PS1, an N64, a Super Nintendo, a GameCube, a PlayStation 2, an Xbox. It wasn't on, Nintendo DS, or not Nintendo DS, that would be actually handheld, which, I'll get into that. It wasn't on just the main consoles. And when I did play on handheld devices, I played on the Game Boy Color. That was probably like the first handheld that I put a lot of time into. Taken to the next generation of that would have been Game Boy Advance, which, funny story, I didn't know about console generations. I just say, hey, I got a new Game Boy cartridge for my Game Boy Color. And that's what my parents thought. That's what I thought. So I ended up getting a game called Golden Sun, I think, for Christmas. And I'm like, okay. And I'm trying to putting in the device, and it says, oh, this ain't working. This ain't going in there. And then either I figured it out or I took it and told my parents and they figured it out. But yeah, you need a Game Boy Advance. Game Boy Color is not going to play the Game Boy Advance game. So a little while later, I ended up getting Game Boy Advance. And I ended up playing a crap ton out of that. Then you take into account the Nintendo DS Lite. I put a lot of time to that one as well. And that is the last one I put any meaningful amount of gaming time. And what I mean by meaningful is bare minimum 1,000 hours. That was the last console I put 1,000 hours or more into, or a handheld console, I should say. And that is something I've been thinking about back then. Like, how did I game? And it wasn't always on a console. I played a lot of my games watching TV. I remember seeing Friends on TV. Depending on which handheld, I watched Pokemon Johto while I was freaking playing Pokemon, like one of the Pokemon games on my Game Boy Color. I don't remember which. It was probably a bunch of, I probably switched it up. And I was watching Pokemon Kanto, Pokemon Johto, watched some of the Pokemon movies. I remember watching the first Pokemon movie in the theaters. Great time. And then eventually got the VHS copy of that and watched it there. And just a lot of times, heck, going to the Family Video or Blockbuster and renting these VHS tapes that had a couple episodes of Pokemon on there. And I remember the ones that I would rewatch a lot and I kept on renting to see, and that was the episode where the Tentacruel attacked that one city because of that one crazy evil lady who wanted to basically destroy their habitat so they could build like some hotels or something like that, or fancy resorts. That was like one of the ones. The other one was, I think, Muck, when he caught Muck for the first time, the power plant area. So yeah, there was a couple of those ones like that I just ended up rewatching a lot because it was on one of the VHS tapes at Family Video or Blockbuster. And I had a lot of fun watching those episodes, watching TV, and gaming, because I could do both. Like, I could hold the hand, like sit back, relax, and just hold up my device, and when something's happening on there, I just set it down for a little bit, watch the interesting part happen, and then like, okay, now I don't necessarily have to focus as much time, then I just lift the device up a little bit and I continue playing. Or sometimes I could watch and play at the same time if the game was like a turn-based game. Pokemon was turn-based, so I didn't have to have an immediate focus on paying attention, because they will wait until I gave my next move to frickin' splash. and then question why it hit splash. But either way, it was a very, very fun experience. And I remember doing that all the way up. Heck, even in high school. I think there was other, like, you had PSP out and you had the Nintendo DS out for a while. I remember still playing on my Game Boy Advance because it still worked. And I still had a lot of games on there that I really liked playing. And I ended up watching, like, Adult Swim. And I think Toonami might have been another show that they had on there. And watching freaking, like, Naruto, Bleach, Futurama, Family Guy, American Dad, all these other, like, shows that they had on there. I think Aqua Teen Hunger Force was another one. Or when I watched MTV, there's like this, like, one was like Rob and Drigg or something like that. There was a whole bunch of stuff like that. I had my handheld out a lot of the time when I was watching TV. Heck, my grandpa was a big movie collector and had thousands. I don't know how many thousands. I think he said he peaked at around 8,000 DVDs at one point in time. And for Blu-rays, before he ended up passing away, I think he said he kind of peaked at around, I want to say it was either 3,000 to 5,000 or 4,000 to 5,000 Blu-rays. And VHS, he said at one point he had like over 5,000. I don't remember the exact amount. But yeah, I ended up, like, movies, TV shows was a big part of a lot of my family's, growing up, because he would let people come over there, write their name down, write what movies or TV shows they borrowed, so that way he can call them and say, hey, someone else wants to borrow this, or, hey, you kind of had this for long enough, can you bring it back? And then we would bring it back, and then we'd borrow some other movies or TV shows, and that's essentially what we ended up doing. There was no payments involved or anything like that. We just, he was just borrowing it to his family and friends, and we had watched a ton of stuff there. I remember watching Bud Abbott and Lou Costello for the first time. If whoever looked on YouTube and they seen that skit, Who's on First, yeah, that's Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, and they have like 30 some movies that are honestly really, really good. Obviously some are better than others. I mean, they have it where he meets Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, meets the Mummy in the Foreign Legion, what do they call it, Naughty 90s. What would be another one? Time of Their Lives is a pretty good one. Yeah, pretty much a lot of their movies are good. Buck Privates, first one I like a lot more than the second one, but the second one's not that bad. Little Giants. Heck, I think they have one where they Jack and the Beanstalk. Hold That Ghost is a really solid one. That's one of my personal favorites. There was another one, but what is it? Hold That Ghost. Oh, Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. So yeah, there's a lot of really good movies back then that I watched a lot of times when I was playing some kind of handheld. And that's the thing. You can do multiple things. It's kind of like the second screen or the second monitor before it, like, you had second monitors on your computers, It's like you had your TV and you had your handheld. That's essentially what it was. Might also have been part of the reason why I got, I kind of moved away from handhelds, because that's around the same time I think I started using second monitor. Yeah, that might be, honestly. So yeah, overall, and one of the things is, like, I tried getting back into my Nintendo DS Lite and playing the games again, but I kind of remember why I stopped playing it. It's because, I would have to repair it and fix it because the hinge on it is broken. I think the audio on it is kind of like messed up. It might be because of the hinge. I don't know on it. So it's not giving you like a good quality audio anymore. So it's just like, yeah, you know what? I think I think I like the idea, and I think I would play it. But I'm gonna if I had a good handheld. The Game Boy Advance I don't want to play again because I don't have a rechargeable battery for it. If I'm gonna spend a lot of money getting repairing that or getting another one, it's like I'm just gonna get a Steam Deck, and I can play all the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS games that I got on a Steam Deck. honestly, that would be a much better experience. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm almost certain now. Like, I think it's pretty much like assured around my birthday is probably going to be around the time that I'm going to get the Steam Deck. Like I said, barring any unforeseen circumstances, that's basically where that money is going to go, because it makes a lot of sense now. I think not only just from a perspective of getting more gaming time in, or getting extra gaming time in by being able to play at other places. I honestly think I'm just going to game overall more, and it's just not going to be like double or the amount. It might be a heck of a lot more than double, because I've found one of the things I've been having a problem with lately is I have a bunch of games on my PC, on Steam. I have like, I don't know how many hundreds of games that I could be playing. It's almost 1,000 at this point, I think. And there's like, oh, I could play this. I could play that. And I'm looking at it, it's like, oh, I could play Baldur's Gate 3, for example. But then I'm thinking, that's going to be a lot of time and a lot of investment on there. I really don't want to spend that much time on my computer just playing it. And maybe not. But then I'm thinking, I bet you that game would probably be a game I would play on a handheld device a lot, because I could be sitting on my bed an hour or two every night before bed, relaxing, watching TV, because that's about how long it takes me to fall asleep anyways. Hour or two, to get tired enough to fall asleep. So that's what I would probably do. It'd basically be like my bedtime game. Or maybe if it's like too story driven, it gets me to it, like thinking, okay, maybe I'll find like another game. Maybe I'll put in there like Halls of Torment or something, and to play that instead, or Vampire Survivors. But yeah, basically I'd be able to play that there, when I'm watching TV during the day, or I'm sitting outside enjoying weather, while it's still nice. I could probably play it then. And I will not care about it's not being on par with some higher end gaming device that costs like $1,000. It's like, oh, it's not this device. And I'm like, I've been through playing more powerful hardware, more powerful stuff on there. It was called the Game Gear. I ended up inheriting that from a relative who passed away by the name of Uncle Ray. And that wasn't the only console or device I inherited that was gaming related, but I tried playing it, and it required 6 or 8, I want to say it was 8 batteries to play. And the battery life on that was worse than my Game Boy Advance. That required 2 batteries. So it just got to the point where, like, I don't care how more powerful you are. You're not giving me a good experience, because I am constantly thinking about how much time do I have left to play my device before I have to get another freaking 8 batteries and chuck the dang thing in there. I'm sorry. I don't care about how powerful you are. Experience sucks. And this is before rechargeable batteries was a thing or was mainstream, So yeah, honestly, at that point, I didn't care about that. In fact, being a more powerful device gave me a worse experience. So I'm thinking, okay, so what if I get these higher end devices that might be more powerful than Steam Deck? Do they offer me, would the experience offered be as good as a Steam Deck? Because I don't really want to have to worry about battery life as, frequently. Obviously, you're going to have to worry about battery life. If you're playing a newer game, you're either going to have to be charged or plugged in, or you're going to have to stop playing after like 2-3 hours, depending on which version of Steam Deck you get. Some of the more or less powerful hardware games that you can play, then your battery life tends to extend. Maybe it's 5-6 hours, maybe it's 7-8 hours. If you're playing like an older emulator that doesn't require much, you might get like 8 to 10 hours. I've heard, like, the highest I've heard for some people say, like, with some of the older emulated games, they got like 10 to 12 hours. But I would just say, even if it's like 5 to 8 hours, that's still a really good amount of time without having to worry about charging your device. Well, I mean, obviously towards the end you would have to start worrying, otherwise your device is going to shut off. But you would pay attention to that and you would plug it in if you're able to. Otherwise, you just stop playing. But yeah, that's just it. Back then, we didn't worry about how powerful the hardware was. We just played the game that was cool because we could play a cool game that was fun wherever the heck we went until the batteries ran out. In which case, you either recharged it or got new batteries, depending if you had rechargeable batteries or not. And that was a lot of fun. So, yeah, I'm rediscovering it, and I think some people either forgot or maybe they just never really thought about it that way, or just were not around. Maybe they weren't around back then, so they never really thought about it. But I think part of the reason why this thought process of it not being a powerful device or not being able to play the latest and greatest is it being a con is because it's a PC handheld and not necessarily just a handheld like a Switch. But even no, I take that back. The Switch is even getting that. It's like, oh, it's not playing the games that were on the PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4, or these other Xbox Series S and X or Xbox One. They're not playing them as good as they did on those other consoles. Like, no shit. Those devices don't, like, their whole appeal is playing the latest and greatest at 4K back then. That's what they're promising and saying crap like that, or 2K or 1080p 60. They had all different slogans depending on what console generation you're talking about. But yeah, that's the thing. People, when it comes down to it, just want to play fun games, get through their backlogs. Because I bet you, like for me, I have a lot of JRPGs on my backlog that I think would be a lot of fun playing on a Steam Deck, for example. Final Fantasy XII: The Zodiac Age is one game that I'm thinking about. Another would be the new Final Fantasy Tactics game. Apparently that's able to be played on the Steam Deck with some issues which might be more related to the classic version from what I understand. I'll look into that one. Apparently I can play Skyrim and Oblivion remastered on there. So those are another two games that I would probably get a crap ton of playtime on. And I'm just thinking, holy crap. Like, honestly, it's insane when you think about it. You can play Baldur's Gate 3. You can play Oblivion Remastered. But when you think about it, for the people who had Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, or PSPs, it'd be like on the Game Boy Color being able to play the original Final Fantasy VII that was, on PS1. Think about that. Imagine playing Final Fantasy VII on a PS1 or on a Game Boy Color, or playing Final Fantasy X or 12, or what would be some other big games, or like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas or Vice City on a freaking Game Boy Advance. That's insane to think about. But that's essentially what Steam Deck offers. You're playing some great games that came out not that long ago on a handheld device. Now, granted, you might not get as much playtime before you have to recharge the battery, but still. The fact that you can play on it at all is insane. And I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe that'll be the device that I finally get around to playing Resident Evil 2 Remake and the Resident Evil 4 Remake, because I'm going to tell you something. I bought those games because they look fun, but I never really played it. I watched other people play them, but I never played it myself. And I'm thinking, why not? It looks like a fun game. I was like, maybe because I don't know, but I think I would play it on a handheld device. I might not get to all of the games that I'm mentioning, but I would get around to some of them, depending on which games I wanted to actually play at that time, because, you have a limited amount of time. More games come out, more games get added to the backlog, and then you play some games, and some games you play more, like, longer than others. Like, for example, when Pal World comes out, full release, I could probably see myself playing that on a Steam Deck, put a couple 100 hours into that, would be another game that I could probably put on there. Enshrouded. I'm not sure if that's Steam Deck verified. V Rising, I think I Steam Deck verified, but you know I could probably go through that. Probably put another couple $100 into there. So yeah, just overall, I think I could be putting a lot more time into games, and I still would not necessarily get to my backlog because more games will get added to the backlog, and that's fine with me because at some point I might want to play them. So, anyhow, that's it. Yeah. See ya.